How do we get motivated, psyched up, or aroused to compete? You have to want to play that tennis match, that golf game, or to compete in that 10K. If you don't, why do it? Perhaps one of the best examples of wanting to go out and be involved is the case of Sam Harrison, a heart transplant patient.
Well, it all started back when I had a heart transplant almost 2 years ago. I looked out my window and there was a lot of activity, and I questioned what it was, and the doctor said it was a Hospital Hill run and challenged me to run that thing next year. And last year I finished Hospital Hill run, and so this year I challenged some of the other transplants to join me, and we're doing it together.
Sam became motivated from within. His goal of running in that single event became extremely important to his entire psyche and aided in his recovery from his transplant operation.
Well, I think it's really, the transplant's an interesting problem in that transplant is really not a cure or anything like that. It's really trading one disease, which is a very, very bad disease, for a whole host of other problems, taking medications, worrying about rejection, worrying about infection and all that. And I think to have a transplant patient who can actually do this amount of activity and actually do this level of exercise is really fabulous, because it keeps their mind intact. I mean, they think about all the things they couldn't do before the operation, and now, at least despite the fact that they're taking these medications and they have all these other worries, they can do this, and it makes them feel just so much better than if they're sitting around, waiting and worrying about something else that's going to happen.
Intrinsic motivation. It's the desire from within to strive for some goal or achievement. The satisfaction you receive from obtaining your goals starts from the motivation we have inside ourselves and gives us the energy to work for these goals. If you find yourself involved in a sport because of your friends, spouse, or parents, instead of your own desire to participate, you'll probably find that you may not do nearly as well as you'd like because that internal motivation just isn't there. A perfect example of this is Little League Baseball. We hear so much about the Little League syndrome today, and sadly it exists. Buck Martinez is a former big league catcher for the Toronto Blue Jays and currently manages his son's Little League team.
I've seen it in some of the other sports, and I've only actually been to one game because of my travels, so I really can't say that I've seen it. But I unfortunately saw it during the basketball, where you're expecting a 9 and 10-year-old kid to go up there and dribble up and down the court, not make any mistakes, and throw one up from 15, 20 feet and make it. And to have coaches and parents down on the side and hollering at their kid. Well, kids don't understand. They're not at a point where they can learn plays, and they can't remember from practice to practice what's going on. So you have to be very patient with them. But to get a kid out there and to holler at him during the course of a game, it's tough enough to keep his attention on the game, but when there's a parent hollering from the sidelines, get over there and watch that guy, and that's not what we're there for. We're there to have fun and let the kids play. I have seen it. I've seen it throughout my whole career in baseball, and it's bad. It's real bad.
In much the same way intrinsic motivation gets us started, the external environment keeps us going as well. Extrinsic motivation comes from the people, atmosphere, and rewards we get for our involvement. This is the type of reinforcement we receive when we see our teammates celebrating after the winning home run has been hit in the weekly softball game. It's also the reward of receiving that medal, ribbon, plaque, or trophy. Together, internal and external motivators are the factors behind our involvement in sports and are the main reason why we may or may not achieve our goals. What do you do to get mentally prepared to compete?
Very important, but it affects different people different ways. Some people can walk right out of the office, go tee it up, didn't know they were going to play golf, and have their best round. Conversely, some people will come out and they'll hit 3 or 4 bags of balls. They know they've got an event. They're trying to key up for it, but they will go out and have their worst round. Well, why does that affect different people different ways? A lot of it is an expectation of themselves and how they put that pressure on themselves to perform. If a person expects to play that day, sometimes they don't key themselves up properly, and that's just as bad as a person that doesn't expect to play and needs to prepare themselves properly. So it's difficult to be able to say how much you should practice and how much you shouldn't practice unless you have a game plan, some kind of program, some kind of goals as to mentally preparing yourself to come out and play golf and giving it your best shot.
The key to preparing for competition is setting the stage for your arousal, being in control. In the past, the accepted way to prepare an athlete for competition was through emotional pep talks. Coaches believed that the best way to prep an athlete was to psych him up as much as possible. The more motivated the athlete was, the better he'd perform. This theory, known as the drive theory, fell apart when many came to realize that some athletes could get too motivated or aroused. As a result, these athletes would not perform well because they were so aroused their concentration fell off. Sometimes it's not the coach who's guilty of psyching a player up too much, but the player himself. Some allow themselves to get too psyched up for an opponent, and as a result, take themselves out of the action.
Going out and playing hard and making a lot of mental mistakes. Mistakes can lead to goals. It can lead to getting a 2-minute penalty. So you've got to play under control, knowing your peak and not going over that.
As you can see, an optimum level of performance exists for athletes. When arousal increases past this level, the quality of the performance decreases. This is the inverted U theory and is far more practical for today's athlete. The graph shows that the top of the scale is where you will reach your peak or optimal performance level. This is when the athlete is performing at his best. Motivated at his peak, yet able to totally concentrate on the task at hand. If an athlete is having trouble reaching that peak, it's probably because of one or two reasons. An athlete who finds he's having trouble getting motivated or is bored by his game is found on the left side of the graph. He may be lethargic in his attitude about practicing in the first place. If he consistently stays on this side, it's time to reevaluate his goals because it's possible those goals are too steep, unrealistic, or at the very least, uninspiring. Conversely, the athlete who finds himself constantly on the right side is having difficulty handling stress and anxiety, and will need to learn appropriate methods to relax and concentrate better. Athletes on the right are too aroused, too worked up to the point of losing sight of the goal. This is sometimes referred to as being psyched out or choking. Obviously, there's a fine line here. You have to be aroused or energized to want to attack your goals, serving that ace or running a sub-40-minute 10K. At the same time, you can't let your energy get the best of you. You don't want to hit that service over the back fence or sprint the first 2 miles of the road race. You've got to concentrate on the whole picture, rationing out that energy and enthusiasm in appropriate proportions.